Welcome back to another piece of Top Choice Movies recap. The movie today was released in 2011. The piece is titled The Ledge. Please subscribe before we begin, and don't forget to like, comment, and share. Watch out for potential spoilers. Detective Hollis visits a fertility clinic intending to donate sperm, but to his astonishment, the doctor discloses that he is infertile. This news comes as a shock to Hollis, especially considering he already has 2 children. However, before he can fully process this revelation, Hollis is interrupted by a fellow officer, who urgently informs him about a man named Gavin, who is on the verge of jumping off a building. Putting his concerns aside, Hollis rushes to the scene to intervene. He attempts to calm Gavin down and engages him in conversation, hoping to understand the reasons behind his desperate actions. Gavin discloses that he feels compelled to remain on the ledge until noon, as failure to do so would result in someone else's death. With over an hour remaining, Gavin begins to share his story with Hollis. According to Gavin, his encounter with Shana occurred when she and her partner Joe moved into his apartment building. They coincidentally rode the same bus and exchanged smiles, initiating a connection between them. A hotel manager, Gavin was taken aback when Shana applied for a job as his staff. After a brief interview, Gavin hired Shana to start work immediately. He later mentioned his new employee to his friend Chris, who happened to be gay. Coincidentally, Shana and Gavin were neighbors who also worked together, leading Chris to suggest she might be destined for Gavin. However, Gavin dismissed the idea since Shana was married. Shortly after, Shana and her husband Joe visited Gavin to introduce themselves and invited him and Chris over for dinner. One evening, when Gavin and Chris arrived at the couple's apartment, Joe asked Shana to get some wine. Gavin went to the kitchen to help and chat with her, mistakenly assuming that Gavin and Chris were a couple. Offended by this assumption, Joe called it an abomination, and Gavin abruptly left. It was later revealed that the couple were devout fundamentalists. Shana apologized to Gavin for the previous night's events at the hotel, and Gavin invited her to lunch. During their conversation, Shana opened a bottle with her teeth, hinting at a potential drinking problem despite her modest demeanor. Gavin's friend Chris is the topic of discussion, as Shana learns about how Gavin took Chris in when he lost his job due to his HIV-positive status being discovered. Meanwhile, Hollis receives a phone call from his wife Angela, which he abruptly ends, triggering a flashback to a morning when his children excitedly greeted him. Hollis then confronts his wife, demanding to know whose children they are, as he is angry about being deceived into believing they were his own for years. After the flashback, the story returns to Gavin as he continues the events to Shana. Joe apologizes for assuming Gavin is gay, but warns him about the consequences if he does not change. Gavin deflects by suggesting they discuss homosexuals in hell another time, as he is running late for work. Before parting ways, Joe invites Gavin to get together on Wednesday night. While riding the bus, Gavin confides in Shana that he was once married, but his wife left him. He starts flirting with her until she reminds him she is married. On Wednesday night, Joe preaches to Gavin about their religion as an atheist. Gavin argues that it is ridiculous to believe only born-again people will be saved, pointing out that a child in China hit by a bus without ever hearing about their religion would go straight to hell. Joe asserts that the dissemination of the gospel holds great significance, but their disagreement quickly escalates into a heated argument. The tension reaches its peak until Shana intervenes and requests Gavin to leave. Shana attempts to engage in a conversation with her husband, but he dismisses her and instructs her to depart. The following day, Shana confides in Gavin about her troubled past as a drug addict and a call girl. She reveals that one day, her pimp sent her to a man who assaulted her within the confines of a church. As a result of the attack, Shana suffered severe injuries, rendering her ability to walk nearly impossible. Joe discovered her the following morning and promptly took her to the hospital, leaving Shana feeling ill. Consequently, Shana implores Gavin to maintain his distance, and he reluctantly agrees. 3 weeks later, Shana observes Gavin providing solace to a grieving staff member, which leaves her impressed. Later that evening, while Gavin is smoking outside, Shana joins him. He extends an invitation to stargaze and attempts to kiss her, but she halts his advances and departs. Joe notices Shana returning home late and becomes suspicious. The subsequent day, Shana visits Gavin's office and kisses him, but their moment is interrupted by a knock on the door. Gavin informs Shana that he will arrange a hotel room and send her the details via email. While Shana is bathing later, her husband Joe reads the email. Luckily, Gavin used a previous employee's address, so Joe remains unaware it is from Gavin. Shana tells Joe she has to cover someone's shift at a hotel that evening, so she has to leave. She then goes to the hotel room where Gavin has been waiting, unbeknownst to Shana. Joe followed her there. Shana and Gavin make love, and when Shana leaves the room, Joe sees her kiss a man, but can't identify who it is. The following day, Gavin asks Shana to leave her husband. Shana says she feels scared and sorry for Joe. Moreover, she has become estranged from him and can only think about Gavin, who says he feels the same way. That evening, Joe has to leave for a church matter. With Joe gone, Shana goes to Gavin's hotel room, not knowing Joe is hiding nearby. The two make love again, while a heartbroken Joe listens at the door. After making love, Gavin reveals that he had a daughter who died 2 years ago in a car accident. He blamed himself because he was driving when a truck was about to hit them, and he turned the wheel the wrong way, resulting in the truck hitting his daughter's side of the car. His wife was unable to forgive him for their daughter's death, leading to their separation. In the present, Hollis confesses to Gavin that his wife had an affair, and that the children he believed were his own are not biologically related to him due to his sterility. Hollis explains that he and his wife faced difficulties conceiving and underwent fertility testing, but he never checked the results because his wife assured him that everything was fine. Months later, they had a child through an arrangement with Hollis's brother, without Hollis's knowledge, so that the child would resemble him. Overwhelmed with emotions, Hollis breaks down in tears as he shares all of this with Gavin. He pleads with Gavin to come inside, but Gavin hesitates, feeling torn. Before they can continue their conversation, another officer interrupts them with news about Joe and Shana, who have gone missing. Gavin continues his story, revealing that he and Shana planned to tell Joe the truth about their affair. However, Shana wanted to confess first to their pastor. One day, Joe witnesses Gavin and Shana kissing, leading him to book a hotel room. While Shana is working a night shift, she is shocked to find her husband there the next day. Joe invites Gavin to their apartment and reveals his troubled past. He was previously married with 2 children and battled substance abuse and sin, which ultimately led to him losing his job and his family. Hitting rock bottom, he stumbled into a church, found solace in God, and experienced a spiritual rebirth. Joe believed that God had given Shana to him to care for, thinking he had pure love for her. However, upon hearing them making love at Gavin's, Joe's despair reaches a breaking point, and he contemplates suicide. Pointing a gun at Gavin, Joe forces him to read a Bible verse that calls for the death of adulterers. However, Gavin counters with the New Testament story of Jesus saving an adulteress by challenging only those without sin to cast the first stone. After Joe releases him, Gavin attempts to call his wife, Shana, but Joe answers the phone instead. Joe expresses his preference for the unforgiving justice of the Old Testament, but insists that only one person needs to die instead of both. He threatens Gavin, claiming to have Shana at gunpoint, and warns that he will shoot her at noon unless Gavin jumps from a building. Detective Hollis urges Gavin to have confided in the truth earlier, emphasizing that it could have helped them find Joe. Gavin admits that he could have been the one to kill Shana himself. He pleads with Hollis to forgive Shana for the sake of their children, explaining that she only strayed because she feared losing Gavin. Joe and Shana observe from a distance as Gavin stands atop the building with only minutes remaining. Hollis desperately implores Gavin not to jump. Gavin asks the detective to convey his love to Shana, taking one last glance at his daughter's photo and realizing he doesn't want the same fate for Shana. He kisses the picture as the bell tolls, then leaps. The crowd gasps in shock as Joe collapses on the road. Moments later, the police discover Joe and Shana in a hotel room and arrest him. At the station, Hollis informs Shana that Gavin loves her. She thanks him before sadly looking at her praying husband in his jail cell as she leaves that evening. Detective Hollis sits in his car, crying, as he watches his family inside the house. He decides to join them, and his children warmly greet him as he enters. They dine together, and Hollis appears ready to forgive his wife. He reflects on his situation, thinking that he thought he was doing okay, but wonders how he ended up this way. What would you have done if you were in Detective Hollis' shoes? Kindly share your opinion in the comment section. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to share your thoughts on the movie you just watched in the comments box below. And don't forget to subscribe for more movie recaps to come your way. Stay safe.